Uh, Thank you everyone for joining the first Portland Tug of the year. We've been on hiatus a little bit. I think we haven't had one in maybe 4 or 5 months. So we're happy to be back. We're back with a new year energy, I guess 2022 energy, whatever that means, whatever that has in store for us. Yeah, let's just go dive right into this. There we go. So if you are looking for the talk of building performant dashboards, you are in the right spot. This is the topic, the main topic that we have for this tug. And then we'll discuss what subsequent tugs might look like and what those topics will look like. But this is an hour long, so we're starting now and then we'll end at 2. And a deeper dive into the itinerary here. I'm going to talk for maybe 10 minutes, hopefully less than 10 minutes, and just give some brief introductions, talk about how the tug works and what's in store in the future. At 1:10, we have our community spotlight. And the itinerary here in general is a formula that we've figured out we like for this tug, especially the remote versions. And so a part of that is community spotlight, where we dedicate some amount of time for you as the audience and some, a Tableau or data viz person in the community to meet someone else in the community. And this is obviously important because we don't have those same opportunities that we've always had to meet people at user groups in person and in line to get the pizza and that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that there's still some connection there. You meet someone new. This month it's Cynthia, and we're excited to have her be the community spotlight. And she's also one of the tug leaders. And then at 1:30, we have Sarah Dorfman, who's a colleague of mine, and she's talking about building performant dashboards. And this is, I would say, a hot topic recently. It's always a topic of how to make your dashboards perform better. So I'm excited to have Sarah walk us through that. A little bit about how this year will work for us is we will do a tug every single month. Typically, and I say typically, these will be on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Though in scheduling out the tugs in advance, I wasn't able to get all of those times exactly. So and next month is an example of that. So typically they'll be Thursdays at 1 p.m., same time as we are at right now. And that's Pacific time. I'm flanked by a number of excellent PDX tug leaders. There's 6 of us in total, and we couldn't, they're the grease and the oil that makes this thing work. And so I'm happy to have them here alongside me. The way we structure these tugs is each lead gets their own meeting. So next month it's Jack, for example, and he'll decide the content for that meeting. That way, I don't just decide the content. And if it were just me, we'd be talking about level of details and maps for 12 months straight. So we want to avoid that and get some diversity of ideas and content here. So I'm going to go through. I just want all the other tug leaders to introduce themselves. And we'll do in the order in which your meet is. So Jack, you go first. Jack, just say your name, where you live, maybe where you work, what your role is, and then just say your favorite chart type. Oh, actually, I'll go first because you probably need to know who I am. I'm Ryan Callahan. I work for InterWorks as an analytics lead there. And my favorite chart type, if you can't tell by the shirt that I'm wearing in the photo there, is maps. I love maps. That's my background. And I used to make maps quite a bit before I started doing Tableau things. And then I still make maps. So that would be my favorite chart type.
No surprises there, Ryan. So, hey everybody, my name is Jack Colbert. I'm an analytics consultant at InterWorks. I've been involved in the Tableau user group since, for about 4 years now, on and off. I live in St. John's. I'm very proud of that. Best neighborhood in Portland, in my opinion. Closest to Forest Park, and we got Pier Park, a lot of parks, a lot of good food. So if you ever want any recommendations for the area, feel free to hit me up. And my favorite chart type, while it's not always practical, I really do like a good radar chart, especially in the fancier vises you see out on Tableau Public. But I've yet to use one or see one in the wild.
Right on. Hi, everybody. I'm Cynthia Maywalt, and thank you, Jack and Ryan. Cynthia Maywalt, she, her. I work at Nike. I will tell you more about myself a little bit like that later. But question at hand is my favorite viz. I'm going to be super boring and say the workhorse of everything. I love myself a good bar chart. If anyone knows me, I love a bar chart. I don't know. It's so practical and useful, and you can get so much done with it. Yeah. That's it. I don't know. JP's not here, so Chris, go ahead. Ugh. Or not. Or just kidding.
Here? No, I'm
Yeah.
here. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Williams. Good to be here. I did live in Portland. I have now moved south a little bit to California, but I'm still part of the team because I come up there and play all the time. I've been in Tableau for about a decade. I too love maps, but I also love heat maps. I think those are things if you have the data that's facilitates such things, it can really tell you a lot about what's going on. And sometimes they'll combine the heat map capability with a regular map. So those are kind of what makes me tick within the Tableau world. So it's good to be here.
Awesome, and I think that just leaves me. So I'm Danny Steinmetz, proudly residing in Southeast Portland, the real best neighborhood. None of that St. John's nonsense, Jack. I do love St. John's. I'm also an analytics consultant at InterWorks. I have been using Tableau for something like 7 years now, 3 years, part of the PDX tug. And my favorite chart's gotta be the rotated 3D pie chart. Easy.
Great choice. Great choice. Hopefully Danny's joking, but maybe not. We'll never know. We'll never know. Well, thanks everyone. The last person on that list is Jonathan, who he is a senior marketing strategist at.
He's on the call. I saw him on the
call?
panelist list. Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
And I'm sorry for skipping you, JP. Apologies.
Oh yeah, he didn't know he'd be introducing himself, but at First Tech Credit Union. So I don't know if he's on or just wants to wave. We'll do that. But so yeah, this is the leadership team for this year. I'm excited to have everyone here, and I'm excited to see what they come up with for the tugs for the coming months. And you'll notice that we're not all in Portland, and that's great. PDX Tug has people from all over the Pacific Northwest that join us, and because we're remote, people are joining from everywhere. It's not just Pacific Northwest. So welcome everyone here. Happy you're here with us. One more quick thought is that if you do have ideas for a presentation or content that you want to see, if you go to our main page, which the URL is there, and if someone can dump that URL in the chat, that'd be great. Or you can email us. If you go to the URL, there's a presenter sign up button, and you can click that and fill out a form, and then we'll see that hopefully soon. Or you could just email us with an idea that you have. Or if you want to be a part of the team, that you can do that as well. So any way you want to communicate with us is good. So moving on to the community spotlight, we have Cynthia, and I don't want to run too much into her own introduction, but I've known Cynthia, I don't know, since 2018 as part of the Tableau community. She's been a frequent RSVP on and she's been here at a lot of our tugs, and so she's been a part of the community. she's been doing Tableau things for a little while, and I'm excited that she's a part of the leadership team now. Also excited to see what she has to show us for the community spotlight. So I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the introduction. Happy to be here, everybody. And thank you so much for having me on the leadership team and for the community spotlight. I see a lot of familiar names on the participants, and I see a hand raised. Mayori, did you want to talk? I've unmuted you. Did you have a question? I saw your hand was up. Or no? We can come back or put it in the thing. That's cool too. But we are willing and able to take conversation. Oh, shoot, you're doing things. How do I assign you to talk? You can do things. Go for it. I don't know how to do this. Someone help me.
She has permissions to talk. Yeah. Let's. Well, if we
We'll
have any
go
questions, we'll
forward.
save those later. Yeah.
Sounds great. Cool. So yes, I have been. I'm going to go through. I'll start sharing my screen. I'm just gonna do quick introduction to me before I get into kind of my data journey, and then I have a demo to kind of go with you to show you as well to go along with this. I grew up in upstate New York, found my way to Portland via DC and Hawaii, but I've been here for about 10 years now in Northwest the whole time. I know I need to venture out, but it's been convenient for where I've worked, which we will get into in a bit, and whatnot. So outside of me getting to Portland, or in my life, I guess when it's not quarantine, I sing in a cover band. We do 90s alternative covers. And if you'd like to see us, follow us, Casual Encounters, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I also play trumpet in an adult marching band, which is not going on right now because of COVID. It's not really advised to, project a lot of that. So, and I'm relearning piano as an adult, which is very difficult. Especially since this hand doesn't work anymore. I typically just find the top line melody since I sing and play trumpet. So this has been difficult. I also foster dogs and I help out with Basic Rights Oregon. If anyone wants to help volunteer for those things, please reach out to me. I would happy to be a contact for that as well. So that's just a little bit about me. And then getting into my kind of data journey. So I'm currently a senior visualization engineer at Nike. Specifically, I am in North America for supply chain. I do see a few NASC representatives on the line. Hello, folks. Thank you for joining. I'm on the supply chain performance reporting team. And I make bar charts out of supply chain data, and I report on moving cardboard boxes in the Nikeverse. It is actually not an uncommon title to see where is my stuff on a dashboard. That is legitimately one of the main questions that we get. Prior to that, I've been there for about 3 years now. And prior to that, I was at Cambia Health Solutions. There I started off as a server admin, and then worked my way to an analyst and then a senior analyst. Prior to all of that, I was in sales, completely not related to data. So just for those who are on the folks that are getting started or feel like you aren't like in that much experience yet, like don't worry. I feel like as long as you have the tools available, which I feel like Tableau does make those resources very widely available, there is hope. No. And yes, sales was not really a place for me. I liked the numbers part of it, but not the actual selling. So how do I only deal with that side of it? And I went back to school. So if any of this that you have seen so far or anything after seems interesting, feel free to reach out to me. My first last name at Nike, Gmail, or LinkedIn. Happy to chat with anybody. So let's see here. I do want to talk a little bit about my space in Nike, what that looks like, just because it is such a large machine. And there's so many facets to it. There's a lot of different, and I'm sure people are like, oh, you work at Nike, do you know so-and-so? I'm probably sure I don't know so-and-so. There are so many people that work here. But we are a small arm in, our house is like a tech house in operations, in the supply chain operations. We sit on the Center of Excellence, and our teams perform North America Supply Chain Performance Reporting. SKIPPER is our acronym. We work with many different parts of the business, like accounts. So that's like your Dick's Sporting Goods, Kohl's, marketplace operations, digitals and stores. That's been huge lately, huge. Our sales last year for digital almost doubled the year before because no one goes to stores anymore because we're all in quarantine. It's been insane this year for the last few years for supply chain has been so interesting and reactive. This is definitely a data set that is swimming with different ways to try and solve those problems that have come up. Transportation, DC, and then inventory planning. So lots of things out there in the Nikeverse. And we just touch on parts of it. Like there are so many opportunities within that, and that's just within supply chain. There's just so many places to go here with data. The stack that we use in-house, Tableau Prep, ThoughtSpot, Power BI. We also have Alteryx tools. Domo is popping up places, and our main data warehouses are SQL, Snowflake, Teradata, and AWS. Just to give another landscape to people out there, or view of the landscape, my role as a visualization engineer, that's just one part of the puzzle that uses Tableau to solve these problems that we have. Our analyst inside, so many different opportunities. And if any of these sound interesting, I'm sure there is a role open. I would love to be able to talk to you about these things. Please feel free to contact me. I believe there is a role for one of those on my team right now. So yes, not promoting at all. Sorry, that's not a thing we should be doing here, right? I'll keep this going. One thing I did want to call out on both of my role experience with at Cambia and at Nike. Sorry, my synth just fell. Let me fix that. The visualization COE at both of these places, the Tableau community, the resources that I've had available at both of these companies has just been so, the outreach has been so strong. And we worked in part with InterWorks a lot with Cambia, but the reach and the sense of community in both of those has been so helpful in trying to get solutions delivered. You don't feel like you're, I don't know. For instance, at Cambia, we had our own Iron Viz. It was a really great way to display, to let people kind of run free and like let them do their passion project that they see in their data that they play with every day, not necessarily their business partners' needs. It was a really great way to foster rapport between teams and just cross communication to get people who get to see the same data looking at it different ways. That was really fun to implement. I'm very glad that I got to be on that team to help that. And at Nike, I get to be part of the Tableau doctor groups, which has been really fun and rewarding. That's actually going on right now. I will be talking to them about scheduling in the future about that better, so I can attend those and help. But for those of you who are on the call and able to go to those for next month, feel free to sign up. They're very helpful. That being said, the Tableau conference from this past year had a few good seminars on building that Viz COE at your and kind of that adoption at your enterprise, your company. So I would suggest to take a look and find these two sessions if you're interested in those. One's more for like at a user level, how to do that, and at like an organization level, how to garner engagement. So yeah, and then I'm going to take the next bit of this. I have created a passion project. So as I told you, I am relearning piano as an adult, and it is not easy. Not one of the easier things I've been doing. And the lack of practice is a little on my own part. So I will go ahead and put the link of this in here. Oh, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. I do have a piano teacher I'm going to now. He's actually the pianist, the keyboardist in the Talking Heads cover band around town, LDW. So I got to meet, I met him before we did a show together, the cover band and his other jazz band. So that's how, anyways, but thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I went ahead and put that dashboard. You don't need to see this. I'll come back to this. Let me get this. I should have put it on server. It is on server, but I'm not demoing it there. Is this an okay size? Should I render my, should I change my screen size? We'll just roll
No,
with
this
it.
is fine. This is fine.
Okay.
You could probably go into presentation mode.
Oh, you're a smarty. Thank you. Let me, no, get me there. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Oh, scheisse. Okay. Zoom, no. Can I, all right, well, we'll get this. So I am learning, this is more the music theory part of the learning of piano. I feel that for me, piano is one of the more visually easier ways for me to conceptualize music theory. I'll start with the circle of fifths, and if you guys want to follow along, there is tooltips that I've included to help along the way. But this circle of fifths is just a way to organize the keys, the tones available, typically starting with the fifth, moving to the fifth segment within that scale. So for instance, we have C here, and you'll see that G is my next fifth. Should have cleaned up these tooltips. G is my fifth down here. And that'll be next in line on your circle of fifths. You'll see D is your fifth for G, and that'll move you along to this. If you're familiar with scales and keys, I've also placed the accidentals in here. So C naturally sits on all of the white notes, which is very easy and lovely as a piano player. But as you go through and as you can see the pattern along the circle of fifths, the number of accidentals increase and then decrease again. And thank you, JP. And so you can follow along there, and it also, you can hover and see those as well. I did not take the time to do an actual key signature. But anyways, from there, you can choose your key. And then select your mode. And I did want to point out, this is all major modes. I had confusion of minor modes in here as well, and wanted to make sure that that was clarified. You have 7 different modes based on the 7 different keys, tones available within your given key. And these modes really just move along that same scale, up that next step in a major scale. And with those, and you can see like each of those just move along. With those, you see C, E, and G in this case are highlighted. That's your triad that goes along with that. So for a C Ionian, that's a C major. And that same pattern, that C, G, E, also shows up in other combinations of keys and modes, such as G Lydian and F Mixolydian. So that would be a way for you to kind of like change, what am I trying to say here? Key change in there. Not that you would really be switching out to an F Mixolydian out of a C, I don't know. Anyways, just a way to showcase that. I don't know, I found this project to be very interesting conceptually. It kind of broke my brain. And I do have other like next steps that I think I want to do with this. I myself want to look at inversions for chords. And then also, especially with like diminished chords, since there's the symmetry there, is basically, it's just one, I think then. change this to minor modes as well. And then Danny Steinmetz was kind enough to send me a video that further broke my brain. And so I kind of want to see if I can grasp that concept and incorporate it in here as well. Yeah, I have a few minutes left, I think. Ryan, how am I doing on time for questions?
You have 2 minutes or 3 minutes if you
All
want to chat
right.
more.
I don't know. What do we got? Anybody got questions for me? Did I
There's a lot of this is awesome and this is cool.
Thank you.
And this is awesome and this is cool. I've saw the development of this a little bit, and I'm impressed by where it started and where it ended.
You were not impressed with where it started, I'm sure.
And what I love about this, I love when people use Tableau to do something that isn't, I mean, this is a data visualization technically, but it's also kind of an application that you can use more functionally in another way. And I imagine, for example, myself I'm also as an adult trying to learn piano for the first time, which is very hard. And my eyes glaze over when I see stuff like the circle of fifths normally, but this is interactive, it's fun. I feel like this would actually help me learn this concept more. And I imagine myself putting it on an iPad, right on where the sheets would usually go on the piano and playing around with this. So I don't know, I think this is great.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a pleasure getting to host and looking forward to being part of the leadership team. Sarah, looking forward to your demo as well. I am very excited to learn about Performant dashboards. I can go ahead and stop sharing my screen if I haven't already.
Tim Robinson has an interesting challenge for you, and to add the sound of the chords as you click them.
I have seen that done. Oh, I did the wrong thing and I stopped my video and not the other thing. I have seen that done. I will think about that. Yes, there's a lot.
That'd be cool.
I'll add it to the backlog. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Cynthia. Great intro to who you are. And there was a point in there, you mentioned you had a job opening. If anybody, it's totally fine if we have job openings talked about. So if anybody has one that they want to, that's in their department or near them at their organization, and if they want to put it in the chat, feel free to do that. I think this is a community organization, so I want to make sure that everyone has the good information in front of them. So moving on now to Sarah. Sarah is a colleague of mine at InterWorks. I think we've been working together for, I don't know, 3 years. How long you've been there?
Almost 4. Yeah.
Almost 4 years. Yeah. Yeah. And she's a colleague I greatly appreciate. She loves diving into the details of things, and which makes her a good person to talk about this topic, which really runs the gamut. And she'll talk about this, but designing a performant workbook, it encompasses a lot of different areas. And you get a little bit into the minutia, but Sarah has a pretty good presentation, which she culls a lot of that down into for the next 20-25 minutes. So, and I'm sorry if this is a part of your introduction, but one of my favorite things about Sarah is that on our free time, she's a comedian, stand-up comedian. So,
pre-pandemic,
pre-COVID,
I did that more, but yeah, slowly making my way back into that. No jokes for today's call though. Right, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. You guys already know at this point who we are. Like Ryan said, I work with him at InterWorks. I'm an analytics consultant, and like Chris, I'm actually in California. I am down in Los Angeles. I've been here for a little over a decade, but I'm an East Coaster at heart, Connecticut native. So today's talk, the reason I wanted to jump straight into kind of just telling you guys to check out the white paper is because a lot of the content from today's talk is drawn from the new Designing Efficient Production Dashboards white paper that came out last summer. Tableau, along with a couple of our colleagues at InterWorks, essentially revised and updated the white paper. And so there's the reason I want to call attention to it is because it's been updated through version 2021.1. It's 80 pages of very detailed content, which of course we're not going to get into in the next 25 minutes. I'm pulling a lot of high-level tidbits and tips and tricks from that. But if you want some really great resources and you want to get more into the details, I highly recommend checking out the workbook. It's got about 25 pages in, 3 really thorough performance optimization flowcharts where you can start troubleshooting any performance or load time issues, starting with your data source. There's one for calculations, and a third to check issues where your visualizations may be causing slow load times. And then on top of that, there's really great instruction and how to use the performance reporting tool in both Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in now. And to kind of take a step back, like I said, before we get into the tips, we also want to think like, well, why do we care about efficiency? Why do we care about having performant workbooks? And I think the biggest thing is that we rarely get a second chance to make a first impression with our dashboards. We always want the end user to have a good experience. We want to respect their time, and we really want their experience to be impactful when they interact. And if your user is feeling like the guy on the left, you want them to feel like the guy on the right, the thing we have to remember about our users is they take performance as an indication of the quality, the reliability, and the trustworthiness. And if they're like this guy on the left and things take too long or they're frustrated, they may leave and not want to interact with your dashboard. So let's go ahead and provide a little more context too, because I've been saying slow load times and slow performance. But one thing to note when I say that is first, context matters. I know that across different organizations and different companies that we all work for, our perception of what's performant may be different than it is for someone at InterWorks versus someone at Nike. And so there may be different perceptions and load times there, as well as depending on the type of dashboard you're making. If you're making something for C-level executives, you want your dashboard to load super fast for them. But if you're maybe making a dashboard for another analyst or a data scientist, your load times could potentially be up to a minute, especially if it's a much more complex, detailed dashboard. And the other thing I also want to note about today's talk in terms of the things we'll talk about to help you make your dashboards more performant is that, and I'm not going to go through this whole diagram, but I have this up here to provide some context that when you click on a dashboard link, this sort of initial request step, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to render that dashboard for you on your browser. And so there's a lot of things that impact performance that we don't have control over. So things like server-side resources, your network speed, and end users like individual browser. We're not going to talk about those things today. Instead, we're going to talk about 3 areas where we can control the performance, and just 3 areas that we can also just be cognizant of and consider as we build our dashboards. And so those 3 areas that we look to control, if you were listening as I explained the optimization flowcharts, they sort of correspond. Those 3 areas we care about are the data complexity, so essentially what we're feeding into the dashboard, and this is where a lot of changes can have really big impact on your performance. And then of course the calculation complexity, these are the calcs that we use within Tableau, and they cut across both the data and the visuals that we make for our dashboards. And then of course the visualization complexity. So everything from filters to sheet structure can have an impact on your performance. So the first area we're going to take a look at, and there's a lot going on here, so just bear with me as I go through each of these step by step. But the first thing we want to look at is our data, and create some efficiencies there. Our best rule of thumb, I know my InterWorks colleagues do this, but generally speaking, when we connect to our data, extracts are always preferred. This is the most performant way to access your data, because Tableau is essentially making a copy of your data and caching it, and it's just going to be a lot easier to pull up information and render your visuals. Because with live connections, while there may be some types of data sources that tout themselves as being faster when you're connected live, your queries are still only going to be as fast as the database or your data connection itself. So if you want to ensure that you have a good foundation for your performance, take an extract. The other thing you can do, and that we always like to tell folks to consider, is to limit your data size. Really, truly only bring in the data that you need to create your analysis in Tableau. So things like trimming rows with data source filters, which you can apply if you see here in the upper right corner that's of my screenshot in blue. You can add data source filters. So especially if you have maybe a table you're connecting to with 10 years of data, you only need 5 years to do your analysis. Applying a date filter at the data source level is a great way to trim your data set. We also recommend with columns, hiding fields you don't need right off the bat. And when you go ahead and you maybe set up your extract, at the bottom of the extract screenshot, you can see hide unused fields. This will also hide anything that you're not using. And this is another great way to trim your data set. The other option that we also like to encourage people is to aggregate your data. So if you're connected maybe to a transactional data set and you only maybe need to roll things up to the day or the week or month level, consider when you're also creating your extract, aggregating, you'll see the second larger orange box to the right on my screen, aggregating data to visible dimensions. So aggregating it based on what is visible in your view and how you're portraying your data. Then of course, there's also the materializing calcs in your data source. And generally speaking, if there's a calculation in Tableau, and we'll get into more detail on the next slide, that you can bring in and put back in your database so that Tableau doesn't have to process it, the better. So just kind of encouraging you, if you have the opportunity to work with your DBAs or your data engineers, always bringing as much as you can back into your database to reduce the processing that Tableau would have to do to calculate that information. We know that's not always the case, but I would say as you're developing things or looking for ways to be more efficient, that's always something to ask yourself if that's possible. And then before I get into a deeper dive on some calculation tips, I do want to say with hosted versus embedded extracts. So hosted is essentially a published data source that's up on your server. Embedded, your data source lives in your workbook. When our colleagues reran performance tests, they noticed that embedded extracts actually performed a little faster in rendering things than hosted did. But I do want to say that there are trade-offs with that, because hosted data sources or hosted extracts are great, especially if you have a bunch of data sources that you're creating that you would like to have centralized for other people to access, and you want to have multiple workbooks connect to them. That's really great because that's fewer items that you have to refresh on your server, fewer things taking up space on your server. So there are some storage and processing and access efficiencies with hosted data sources. So overall, I would say from this slide, the big takeaways are extract over live connections, hosted over embedded, and then of course, limiting your data to what you need for your analysis. And there's, as I said, several different ways that you can do this, like aggregation filters and column reduction. So next, we've got our calculations. So I'm going to harp on this again, but consolidating your calculations will also help with your performance. One type of calculation that we do encourage people to move out of Tableau and put back into their database are row level calculations, particularly ones where you're maybe recoding some values using string functions or string logic. Moving row level calculations to the database reduces a lot of processing time because Tableau now doesn't have to go through every row in your data to make those calculations. So again, if you can move those to your database, that's a huge win. The other thing to think about is if you built a workbook, you have lots of calculations in it, but you've noticed that you keep repeating the same chunk of logic in multiple calculations. The best thing you can do is to take that repeated logic and pull it out and make it its own calculation. So what happens is if it stays in the calculations, Tableau is rerunning that logic each time it runs the logic for those individual calculations. But if you pull it out and make it its own calc, Tableau only has to run that logic once, caches it, uses those cached results and applies it to the other calculations. So that's a nice time saving in terms of processing and querying that Tableau has to do. A couple of other ways to improve your speed with calculations. Min and max functions are much faster than average and attribute because Tableau, for example, when it's using the attribute function, it has to look for the max and the min and check that they equal each other. So there's lots of efficiencies with just using these two functions in lieu of these other ones. The other thing to note, And I know I've experienced this, and sometimes it can't be helped, but count distinct as a function is very slow. So when you can, consider using count or row count. So like in the new relationship model, when you connect to your data and you're on your worksheet and in the data pane, it shows you each of the tables you're connected to. There's usually a count at the bottom of each table that you can do. That's that row count or record count. And that's a great way to work around using count distinct if you're experiencing some slowness with your data. The other great alternative, which I was very excited about when this came out, starting in version 2020.3, is the in operator instead of the or operator. From a syntax and like writing out my calculation, this is so much faster than having to write or statements, multiple or statements in a calculation. The reason this is also faster is because with an in statement, Tableau only has to essentially check this, like something like the subcategory field against one list. Whereas with the or statements, what Tableau is doing is first going to your field, looking for the first value you specify, then starting over, looking for the second value. So again, you're cutting down on the processing Tableau has to do to get this information for your calculations. The next big thing on calculations that was a really interesting find that our colleagues made is that Tableau's native grouping function is not the fastest, most performant way to make groups, surprisingly. The best way they found from a performance perspective to make groups in Tableau, of course, they'll say adding it back to your database if possible, but if not, the next best option is to make case statements, followed by using sets, the sets feature in Tableau, then the native grouping function, and then if else statements. The other little tip is if you ever just have to do some simple renaming for values in a field, instead of considering grouping, maybe just consider some aliasing. I would say the only caveat with that is that if values in your field might change, or there may be just, new values coming in, that's just something to be cognizant of, and it may break anything that you do if you alias. So I would only consider this maybe on fields that have where the values are a little more stable. And then of course, the third area that we want to have some performance considerations for and figure out ways to maybe improve our load times are with the visualization aspect of our dashboards. So one thing that our colleagues noticed is that fixed size dashboards are better than automatic sizing. So when you're designing your dashboard, setting a fixed size is going to be preferred because Tableau can better cache the results and show your dashboard to your end users since it's already a predictable size. Automatic sizing, especially in larger organizations where all the users might have various computer options and different browser settings, Tableau is going to take longer to process and bring up the dashboard for each user. If, however, having a fixed size dashboard, people are a little too finicky about that and they're like, no, I want some flexibility, but automatic sizing makes things slow. I found a good middle ground is to set a range, a fixed range. So when you go to the size menu on your dashboard page, you can also set a range for the width and you can set a range for the height. So it's sort of a happy medium between the two if you do need to have a little more flexibility with sizing. The next point I want to talk about where we can find a lot of performance improvement is with your marks on your visualizations. So when a mark essentially, I'm sure most folks on the call know this, but for anybody who may be new to Tableau, it's any point, bar, plot, or symbol on your visualization. And if you have a crosstab on your dashboard, one cell in that crosstab is considered one mark. So I know that sometimes we get asked to make dashboards with crosstabs in it. So that's something to be cognizant of if you're asked to put a very wide or very long crosstab, maybe in a part of your dashboard. The reason why we want to be cognizant of our mark count is because the more marks or symbols you have on your visualization, the more work it is for Tableau to load those. So one way to check your mark count to see if it's really, really high or you're just not sure what it is, always in the left-hand corner of your screen on a worksheet when you're working in Tableau, the mark count is going to be in the far lower left corner right below your data source connection tab. And that'll give you a clue as to how many marks you have in your visualization. Because it isn't just so much that more marks is more for Tableau to process, but as humans, we also have like an upper limit to how much information we can process. For us, there isn't going to be a huge difference between 3,000 marks on a chart and maybe 300,000. So maybe in the case of something like scatter plots, where you have a lot of marks here, maybe for end users, they can tell that, oh, okay, the data is concentrated in this area on the sort of in the lower left corner of this grid, but potentially using something like density marks as your visualization mechanism on your chart might be better to help the users interpret what's going on in the data. And you also have a win performance-wise because there are fewer marks used to make the density chart. And then last but not least, everyone's favorite, sometimes overused, filters. Filters is an area where we can get, we can see a lot of performance effect. The more filters we have, again, the more work it is for Tableau, particularly if you have filters with high cardinality, meaning a lot of different values in your list of filter options to choose from. Another thing to be cognizant of is if you have your filter set to only relevant values so that essentially it adjusts as you select other filters. That can also create a lot of performance slowdown as Tableau has to cross-reference with all the other filters and conduct more queries in order to make those filters show the relevant values. So generally we suggest aiming for 3 to 5 filters a dashboard, not just for performance purposes, but also for the benefit of the end user who may also get overwhelmed by a lot of different filter choices on their dashboard. One thing that I learned about, which is a good way to, if you have especially a filter like a multi-value list or multi-value dropdown of like customer names, for example, is instead of having this multi-value list that users, where Tableau has to essentially, when you click to open this, render all of the names here so that you can see them. I would say if your end users are fairly familiar with the options in this field, or only know that they're ever going to search for specific customers or other values in this field, consider using the multi-value custom list. They can start by typing in the name of the value or whatever's contained in the value, and then the options. Tableau will only show them the options that are relevant to what they're searching for. The other thing to consider too, from a user experience perspective, is going to your customize option at the top of the filter edit menu and select using an apply button on your filters. If you have a multi-select filter, like the dropdown, for example, every time a user selects a name, Tableau is going to adjust the dashboard with those values. So if you have the apply button in place, your users can first select everything they need and then hit the apply button. So Tableau only runs everything once. So those are, I know I just covered a lot in a very short time, but those are our biggest tips and takeaways from the white paper, the stuff that seems to have the biggest impact and comes up the most for ourselves and for other folks that we work with. So time for any questions. I haven't been able to look at the chat, so I'm gonna let Ryan and maybe some of my other colleagues help let me know what's popped up, and we will get your questions answered with the time we have.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Sarah, now is the time to add those in. I wanted to reiterate what Sarah said about a lot of this is derived from this white paper, which came out just a few months ago. And it really does have the latest and greatest, and that's important because some of the things that I honestly thought were sort of gospel within designing a dashboard, they've, in doing their performance metrics that they came up with this, they realized that some of that stuff isn't actually true anymore because Tableau engineers are constantly tweaking the back end to make things more performant. So for example, one of those things that really blew my mind was when I create a parameter list, I've always had the display as text if it needs to be text, but always had the the actual value as an integer, because it was always my understanding that having an integer was faster. Turns out that you can actually have a string in there and reference that string, and it's just as performant. And if I remember correctly, the white paper says that it might be even more performant as a string, probably depending on the length of that string. So that's just one of those things. So even if you've been in Tableau a while and have an idea of what is performant and what's not, I would definitely dig into this paper and see what the latest and greatest is. There's some conversations or questions about where they can find this presentation. This entire meeting gets recorded. Tableau gives me that recording maybe later today or tomorrow. And then when I get that recording, I'll send it out via a link in an email, a follow-up email. And actually I have it'll be posted here. I just sent the link, and this is where Tableau posts all of the recorded user groups. So this isn't, not just ours will be here, but every user group across the globe. So there's a wealth of good information there.
Oh yeah, and there's one other thing I realized I wanted to add when I was speaking about the fixed versus automatic sizing dashboards, because I know some people may have row level security implemented on their dashboards, meaning when a user looks at the dashboard, they're only going to see data relevant to them that they have access to. So if you have row level security on the dashboard, the fixed sizing performance win that you get, because Tableau caches the dashboard, is not applicable in those circumstances, because Tableau has to render the dashboard differently for each end user because the content that they can see is different. So that was the only caveat I wanted to mention, was that there isn't that little performance boost with dashboards with row level security, even if it's fixed. I would still keep it fixed as a best practice, but Tableau can't cache it because it's going to have to look different for every end user. And I saw we've got a question.
Yeah, so Sarah, if the data is hosted on server, is it still understood to generally stay away from using relevant values in the filter?
I mean, we generally advise staying away from relevant values in general. I think it also just depends on what the performance of the rest of your dashboard is like for end users. Because I know in some circumstances when I'm building workbooks or dashboards for clients too, sometimes the relevant values filtering option is a huge win or could be necessary in certain circumstances. It's a little tricky. I don't know, Danny or Jack, do you want to weigh in on that and your use with that type of filter feature?
Trying to think if I have any thoughts there.
I can answer the sort of the original question there.
Yeah.
Even if it is the data is hosted on server as an extract, that will in itself make everything more performant, right, most likely. Though when the user is dropping down the filter, they're doing that on their browser, and so there's still that communication between the client's browser and server. A query has to happen to find the relevant values based off of the other filters there. So it still is the case that query is happening and that calculation is happening. That stuff isn't preloaded into server. So still, if you're looking to improve performance and think maybe the filters are one of those, that you might start thinking about removing the relevant values.
And we have the question about making sure they're on the list for future meetings. I believe if you've signed up through the link, so if you got the link to this meeting, not from someone just emailing it to you, then you should be added to the list. Ryan, you're muted.
And then I'm throwing in this is our main page for the tug. If you subscribe there, then you will also get all of the meeting invites for sure. Some people here came via Tableau in an email they sent out that they might not be on our list. So if that is the case, yeah, go ahead and subscribe, and then you'll make sure you'll definitely get emails from us for future meetups. And I guess with that, well, thank you, Sarah. I know that's a lot of information that you've had to cull down, and because there's a lot there. If people really want to get into the weeds with this and get more, definitely download the white paper. I actually keep a copy on my desk, and I actually had to find my printer wherever that was to print this off. But it's super useful. So definitely recommended for you to download that and comb through it. Our next meeting is February 16th, so that's coming up soon. Jack, I don't know, do you have enough direction of where you're going for that? If you want to share, maybe give a sneak preview of what that'll be.
Yeah, so nothing, no specific details other than part of the meeting will be me doing a walkthrough of natural language generation and why BI analytics people should care about it and how some things you can get started with within Tableau, and yeah, just kind of a background there. And then the second half TBD still.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for future meetings, anyone, we want to hear from the community, what are you all interested in? How can we make these as beneficial to everyone participating as possible? So please share your ideas on the splash page. There's a place to submit your ideas, and it would help us out a lot.
Yes,
Awesome.
thank you, Danny.
Also,
I was gonna plug. I was like, yeah, somebody find me content. I know y'all have questions. Please. Yes. Sorry, Jack.
I was gonna say, like, we love hearing from the community in terms of like if you're working on any cool personal projects that you're excited to share, or you think it's like a creative, unique application of Tableau. We'd love to see it. So always looking for submissions there.
Agreed. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to our presenters, Cynthia and Sarah. We're happy to have you here and great presentations on both of those. So appreciate all of that. And then for everyone on the call, we'll see you next time. See you February 16th.